Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be your host, but it's also an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Of course, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow, rate, review us on your podcast app, check out our Substack, do all the things. We have links in the show notes to make all this stuff easy to find. It really does help so we can continue having great, important conversations like the one we're having today with Dr. Roger Herbert, retired Navy captain. Dr. Herbert retired as a captain of the U.S. Navy, having received his commission as an officer just after graduating from Davidson College. He then went on to graduate from Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Class 131 in 1985. So that's Bud/S. Is that how you say it? Bud/S? Okay.
You say buds.
Buds. Okay.
Buds,
All right.
yep.
I recognize the SEAL part of it. I didn't know about the Basic Underwater Demo. That's how ignorant I am about. But I learned a lot.
It goes back to our old days. Our old World War II days. We just sort of keep that hanging on the underwater demolition. Yeah.
That's awesome. So that was Class 131 in 1985. Dr. Herbert reported to a SEAL team that specializes in undersea operations for his first assignment in naval special warfare. From there, he had a number of operational tours, including as a commander, operations officer, and executive officer. He also served under the Deputy Commander of U.S. Naval Forces Europe, the Deputy Director of Information Operations, the Joint Staff and U.S. Special Operations Command's liaison to the U.S. Coast Guard. After retiring from the Navy, Dr. Herbert was named head of school for the Outdoor Academy and joined the faculty of the Naval Academy in Annapolis, where he served as the Robert T. Harris, I think that's how you say it, Distinguished Military Professor of Ethics. And if all this hadn't kept Dr. Herbert busy enough, he is also the editor and co-author of several books, including most recently The Ethics of Special Ops, Raids, Recoveries, Reconnaissance, and Rebels, and Ethics at War. How should military personnel make ethical decisions? But I think most importantly, Roger, he gave me permission to call him Roger, has the best sister in the world. So would you like to tell us about who your wonderful sister is?
I have to correct you right away. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, Corey, and also really well done on that.
Oh,
intro.
Thank you.
That is brutal, getting a military-looking bio. But I have to correct you right off.
Okay.
I don't have the best sister. I have the two best sisters.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was fortunate enough to be be born between an older sister and a younger sister, who are both just extraordinary human beings. But you've had the privilege of working with my older sister Liz for I guess many years. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been a few years, I think 3 or 4 at least. And actually, Liz is the one who got us into the Democracy Group. We initially had her on our show because I was so fascinated with the work she's doing with Village Square. And we've subsequently become just very, very dear friends. So,
yeah. She is extraordinary, and what she's done at the Village Square. I mean, if you had said of her back when she was a teenager that she'd end up running, putting together a program that brings desperate people together, that would be no surprise. Back then she was just born for that job, and she saw the need and she stepped into it, and I'm real proud of everything she's accomplished.
So does that mean she was breaking up fights between you and your little sister, or how did you figure all that out?
Okay, I'll tell you how.
Okay.
So I'm 2 years behind her, but my sophomore year they moved me up from the JV to the varsity football team, and she was a cheerleader. Oh. And so she's a cheerleader for our school. she on sequentially dated two guys from the enemy, from and they were both seniors, and so and they were horrible people. I hated them.
Oh,
Yeah. But she reached out to the adversary even back then. And I remember, I think the only penalty, I was a pretty disciplined football player. I think the only penalty I ever received in high school was I saw one of them on one play who looked very unprotected, mostly because the whistle had blown. and Liz, I got her on the sidelines, and Liz yelled at me.
wow. So you got a 15-yard personal foul for that one?
Oh, I did indeed.
All right, all right. Well, I was actually surprised to learn about your passion for football, and it was something that you had in mind. Were you offense, tight end? Like where were you playing?
No, I definitely wasn't a tight end. I played fullback a little bit. If you
Okay.
ever threw a ball anywhere near me, I was guaranteed to drop it.
Stone
Um,
hands.
oh my God! I mean, there was just something wrong. I don't know what it was. But no, I've played linebacker, defensive lineman, fullback, and then let me see. When I was at Davidson, my sophomore year, I was uh, my sophomore year. We were playing Boston University. They don't even have a football team anymore, but we were playing Boston University, and our starting guard went down, and I was amazed that they moved me there, and I was a decent size, I guess, as a fullback, but definitely not as a guard. But anyway, I ended up staying there and
So you,
played the
you
rest of
did
my
a lot
time.
of blocking and tackling, kind of a predicate to your eventual career.
I suppose. I
Well,
thought about it that way, but I
when I
got
was
run over a lot too, and that was a predicate to my career.
Oh man. Well, I was curious about that because it was football, and then it sounds like you had designs on maybe becoming a physician, a doctor. Um, at what point did you? How did you eventually became a Navy SEAL? Like you got to the major leagues, like the elite level of the military. You could call it the equivalent of a major league sport at the very least. When did that switch come about? How did you decide to go from football, maybe becoming a doctor, to be pursuing a career in the military?
Yes, well, I'm not the hero of the story. It wasn't terribly deliberate. So I mean, I was a good student at Davidson. Didn't knock anybody's socks off, but it's a good hard school. So being slightly above average is something you'd be proud of. So I was doing okay, and but I really did focus a lot of my attention. Football was very important to me while I was there. And finally, it's like, well, the NFL is probably not going to be knocking down my door. So I started focusing more, and I'd gone there uh, with the intent of going to medical school, mostly because I lacked imagination. I mean, I got decent grades in school, so I guess I'll be a doctor. I don't know. My grandfather was a doctor, so and that's about as far as it went.
Mm.
And so I realized I needed to kind of up my game to get into a good medical school. And one of the things I did was I volunteered at Charlotte Memorial Hospital, uh, where I discovered that I hated hospitals. The light just wasn't good for my complexion, and uh, I hated doctors. I was just a daggone volunteer, and they were super mean to me. It's like, dude, I don't get paid for this.
Yeah.
And then maybe what the kicker was, Corey, is I discovered that I hated sick people.
So hated hospitals, hated doctors, hated sick people. So yeah, maybe being a doctor was not the right road
So
to go down.
so I'm like in this existential crisis. I'm at the end of my time at Davidson. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I started thinking I just needed something, right, while I figured things out, and I looked into the Peace Corps.
Mm.
I looked into bumming around Europe. Anyway, I had a buddy of mine who I played football with, whose dad was with the underwater demolition teams, the UDT in Korea. And yeah, that was the precursor of SEALs. Anyway, one day we were just hanging out, and he told me about his dad. He told me what he did. He mentioned what the SEALs were, and that. Yeah, I sort of had the same impressions of it that you did. It's like, well, that sounds pretty cool. That sounds, it's not the NFL, but it's kind of like that. And so I said, yeah, what the heck? And back then we didn't know anything. In many ways, those were the good old days.
Mm.
This was before the books, the movies, whatever. So. Yeah, so I didn't know much about it. I talked to my dad a little bit about it,
Yeah.
and he was able to help me out, to introduce me to a couple folks that were SEALs. So I learned about it, but basically my decision was made, shortly after, probably a it was kind of a beer induced decision. And then, the next day after the beer had worn off, it still sounded like a pretty good idea. So I just did it.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And I was absolutely ignorant about what I was doing going into it. But yeah, it all worked out. And I had no intention of staying for longer than a few years to figure things out.
It's funny how major life decisions can be made that way.
Yeah.
The trip that I went on to meet my wife, this isn't directly related, except in
Yeah.
that a major change in my life happened. A buddy of mine came up north. He was traveling down south with his dad's company, and they were doing this, the equivalent of glamour shots, but it was like a traveling company going all around down south. And I was so fascinated by it. And I was visiting with them while they were back up north. And I said, "Oh man, that sounds like a ton of fun." And I had a couple of things winding down, and I just thought, man, I'd love to just travel around with you, bum around with you for a week or two. And coincidentally, we ran into his dad, whose company it was that night. We were at a Chinese restaurant by our house, and he brings me over to say hello to Marvin, and Marvin just looks me up and down. He says, "So, kid, you'll want to. I hear you. So." Eric tells me you want to come down south. I'm like, yeah, I was thinking about it. Sounds like a lot of fun, Marv. He says, all right, here's what you do. You go home, you pack your bags. I'm picking you up at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're going to take the dynasty down to Atlanta, and you're going out to Alabama, kid. And that was it. And then literally a day or two later is when I saw this vision of a woman who eventually became my wife about 3.5 years later.
That's a great story.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you what, if Mav talked to me like that, whatever he said, yes,
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course it was a 16-hour drive in the Dynasty with Marv chain smoking, and he was one of the guys that was like, "What are you doing, rolling down the window? You're letting all the smoke out." It's great. Okay, so major life decision. Well, in all seriousness, one of the things I was curious about was. I understand that the program is very, very difficult to get into, and even more difficult to stay in and complete. How difficult was that whole process?
Yeah, it was hard. I'll tell you this, getting in was a lot easier then than it is now.
Mm,
It's just extra, especially, so I came in through OCS, meaning I wanted nothing to do with the military out of high school.
okay.
Um, uh, I got one of my first recruiting letters was from Naval Academy, and my dad was sort of excited about that. And he was always trying to push that or ROTC, and I wanted nothing to do with the military back then. Um, uh, so
So you got your commission as
yeah,
an officer after
right,
Davidson. That was
right.
before SEAL training.
That's right. And getting that's right. You had to, and I did decide to go in. A lot of people do decide to go in through the enlisted channels because it's easier. But getting in so I got in with a guarantee that I would go to Buds afterwards.
Okay.
Um, um, but then once you get there, yeah, it's hard. And it always has been hard. But these days, it's just hard getting into the door. I mean, the people who come in through OCS, the Stanford quarterback, the Rhodes Scholar. I mean, it's like these. It really is hard getting in that way. At the Naval Academy, the competition. I think for many years, the most difficult thing to get is to get your commission as a naval special warfare candidate. And so I just don't even think that I would have been able to do that these days. But yeah, once you're there, once you get there, it is hard, but just sort of famously hard. Especially the first, it's a 6-month process.
Okay.
The first 2 months are really, you're not learning anything except for maybe you're learning about yourself. You're learning, how far your body can go, how far your mind can go before you fall over. And that really is what first phase is about, sort of that self-exploratory to learn how far you can go. And, everybody has a limit. The thing is, we all kind of think it's here, when I think for just about every person, it's way up here. And so we push our students, we push BUDS candidates closer and closer to where they think their limit is. And most people make the intelligent decision. You're about to kill me.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna quit, and that's sort of prudent decision. Then a couple of wackos will say, "Yeah, what the heck," and just keep going.
Right.
And then you realize it's like, oh, that really wasn't my limit. I can keep going further. And then we take them even closer to where their real limit is. So maybe they can see that limit on the horizon, and knowing how far you can push yourself is sort of the secret sauce of being a SEAL, I think.
So you're already indicating another part of your trajectory, which was you got to the point where you were training SEALs.
Yeah.
Did you reshape or augment the program once you were in that position, or based on your experience, or tell me a little bit about that part of your experience?
Yeah, so that was my we call it a major command tour. So when you're a captain, which was where I retired, sort of the Navy equivalent of a colonel, right? If you're fortunate, you get to command during that time. So ultimate responsibility and accountability of an organization. And I was privileged to be assigned to command the Naval Special Warfare Center, which runs all basic and advanced training for the SEALs, and also for our for the Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen. That's our boat drivers. But kind of the famous course is BUDS.
Okay.
That's what gets all attention. And it was I do believe that every good SEAL, if you ask them what their favorite tour was, every good SEAL is going to say, yeah, that was when I was a lieutenant and kicking down doors and jumping out of airplanes and doing all that fun stuff. But I think this was my favorite command, and I just loved it, because you get to be there as people are realizing, in some cases, lifelong dreams, because now everybody knows about the SEALs, and so in some cases, lifelong dreams. You're there to help pick up the pieces for folks whose lifelong dreams just kind of came to an end, which is most of them. It's a 20 to 25% succeed, the rest go off, don't make it through.
Right.
And so yeah, that was it was just so satisfying. Did I change things? I think every commanding officer owes it to the command you take over to advance it a little bit. So I took over a command that was very healthy. But I think that I think that I did advance it a little bit. We were under, actually, I personally was under a great deal of pressure from literally from Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, it was Donald Rumsfeld to my two-star admiral to me
Wow.
saying, we need more SEALs. We need more SEALs. And my counterpart in Army Special Forces, he was getting an earful too. We need more SF because that was the war we were in.
Okay,
Yep,
so this is early, the first part of the 2000s. It sounds like this is after 9/11.
that's
Um,
right.
okay, so you
Yeah,
were
I took over the command in 2006. I was
okay.
there 2006 to 2008.
Oh wow, so
Um,
those were critical times.
yeah,
I should have looked at my timeline for that period, but in particular, sending sending young leaders to Afghanistan and Iraq. Is that right?
oh yeah, yeah. Actually, and we had been there for a while at that point. But Iraq, in some ways, was starting to, well, actually, both theaters, they were both deteriorating
Hmm.
significantly then. And and again, special operations was kind of leading the way at
Yeah.
that time. We were so stinking busy, and yeah, we needed more. But of course, the we didn't need SEALs light. We needed SEALs,
Yeah.
and so that meant that the program kind of needed to move in many of the same directions. And whatever it is about that training that has evolved over decades, there is a secret sauce there that creates this thing that is a SEAL. And so you know, I had to resist a lot of pressure to kind of, to make it easier, to make it simple. And I don't even know if that would have helped anyway. But
Yeah.
the things that I did that made me proud of what, especially proud of what happened at that command during my tenure. And of course, it was during my tenure. This is the command is 800 some odd people, and just surrounded by extraordinary people that were doing wonderful things. But so we together, some of the things that we moved along is we were helped by the rest of the Navy. They went. The Navy has never really recruited for us. They got active in recruiting directly for naval special warfare, and did a terrific job for us there. Um, once we got them, we took every single. We had a list of maybe 75 different initiatives that eliminated stupid reasons that people would leave.
Oh,
And I mean, we scrubbed everything we did to make sure that nobody left for a stupid reason.
okay. What would be
And
examples of that?
uh, just things like injuries,
Hmm.
things like bad leadership.
Okay.
Um, so when you go to buds, officers and enlisted do that together. Way more enlisted than officers. Donald Rumsfeld did not need new officers. He needed enlisted SEALs.
Yeah.
We had and one of the things that was causing attrition was bad leadership, bad student leadership.
Okay.
So you get there, and I mean, you get there, and these are ensigns, and they're and maybe Lieutenant JGs. They're brand new at leading, but we needed them to lead their troops well, and they would have maybe um, 6 or 8 enlisted people assigned to their boat crew, and really bad boat crew leaders resulted in more injuries in that boat crew, more students that said, "I've had it. I can't do this anymore." And so I put a lot of pressure on my officers to lead. There was this this idea going out there that, especially at Annapolis, especially at the Naval Academy, that the way you get through is you got to become the gray man. You just blend in,
Mm.
and I became the Grim Reaper. As soon as I saw an officer that was doing that, I said, I'm sorry, son, this is not what we need. And I was very quick to pull them out.
Are there certain individuals that come to mind for you where you who influenced you to become the leader that you ultimately became?
Oh, that's almost too many to name. I mean, throughout my career, there was always, that certain someone who either by good example or bad example, I'd say, and right, I mean, we all do that. It's like, that's not what I'm going to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
I'll give one special shout out though. My When I first came in, I was assigned to SDV Team 2. As you mentioned, it's kind of a weird SEAL team that focuses on undersea operations, and not too. And you come in and you're an assistant platoon commander, right? A SEAL platoon is usually 16 people. It's got 2 officers in it, usually a lieutenant, which is the same as like an Army captain. So been around for about 6 or 7 years. And then a brand new ensign or JG comes in as his assistant, and so far it's all he. Naval Special Warfare is open to women now, but we don't have one yet. So when I say he, that's
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, so I come in there and I'm an assistant platoon commander, and life is good. You're just kind of learning. You're watching the platoon commander lead, and for various reasons, that platoon commander was pulled away from the platoon with still about maybe 8 months to go before we were going to deploy. And my commanding officer, God bless him, he took a big chance. They decided to bump me up to be platoon commander. I was still an ensign. And they bumped me up to be a platoon commander. And he thought I was ready. And I will tell you, I was not ready. I was not.
You would not have promoted you.
I would not have, if I had, I would not have promoted me. And by the way, it's not a promotion. It's, I was still an ensign, but now I'm in charge of something that I used to be, I was backup before. Anyway, but one of the reasons he promoted me was he knew that the senior NCO, the senior enlisted, he was a senior chief. He knew that guy's quality. His name is Vi Meyerholtz. And he would agree. Anyway, he was just freaking amazing. He was, at one point, my commanding officer introduced Vi to my parents. My parents came out to meet me after my deployment. I didn't have a girlfriend to meet me on the pier. So my parents were there, though. That was good. And my commanding officer introduced me to Vi, and he goes, Roger's dad, meet Roger's dad.
Oh.
And it really was the case. I mean, he taught me how to be an officer, and he insisted that I be an officer. I remember one time, the people that I was leading are people that I really SEALs are great people. They're just really good people. They're funny. They're just good to hang around with. I want them to be my best friends, but I was also their leader. And I remember Vi took me aside one time and he goes, hey, look, these guys have plenty of friends. What they need is a leader. And when you decided to become an officer, you gave up on that. So lead these troops. Remember that really well. So I would say that if I were to say just one person who was my mentor, it was not another officer. It was my first NCO, my first platoon chief.
Yeah. That's great. There are any number of assignments and operational tours I'd love to dig in, but there's one pivotal moment, and it sort of bridges to what I want to talk about after this. But there's a pivotal moment when you thought you were going the route of pursuing a PhD, from what I understand, but then then something happened to mess that all up. And I think if I heard this correctly, I think it was on September 11th, 2001. Okay, so first of all, do I have that correct? And if so, can you tell us that story?
Yeah, and I don't know how you got that story, but that's awesome. That's some good background work on your part. But yeah, I mean that is the truth. So honestly, my journey as an academic starts with this really pretty lieutenant who I started dating,
Oh,
and she went off to Naval postgraduate school, and we hadn't had uh, a SEAL at Naval postgraduate school for a long time. And Naval postgraduate school is out in Monterey. It confers a master's degree, and so I did everything I could to convince my community that we needed to send me to Naval postgraduate school, and of course the good news is I did end up marrying that gal. That's my wife Gretchen,
how
who
about that?
who yeah, and she stuck around the Navy a little longer than I, and she's ended up retiring as an admiral.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, she makes me salute her every day. Um,
My wife does too, but she's not technically an admiral.
yeah. So so that's true for a lot of people, but Gretchen can actually charge me with a UCMG violation if I fail to take out the draft. No, of course
That's
that's just
great.
being silly, but anyway, but I got there, and it turns out, and I studied. I was a biology major. I was going to go be a doctor, as we said before, and it turns out I studied national security affairs. So basically, this is political science. It's international relations, and I really dug it. And there was one professor in particular, a guy named Frank Tatey, and sadly he died before I ever pursued this. But he really uh, got my juices going on this one. I remember one day in class, he walks in and he just sets down uh, Rawls's Theory of Justice. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but this is a thick book
Yeah.
of political theory. And he goes, "Hey, come talk to me about this in a week." And then one time he throws down Michael Walzer's Just and Unjust Wars, and he goes, "Come talk to me about this in a week." And it's like, oh my gosh. And there was one day he sat down and he said, maybe you want to stick around and be an admiral or something like that, but you really should go get your PhD and go into academia. And then he walked out, and I mean, the bug definitely got me. And so I was planning on doing this. I had incurred enough time in the Navy that, or enough, I owed the Navy for this master's degree. And by the time I got done with that, I'd start getting really doggone close to maybe someday getting a pension, maybe someday commanding a SEAL team, which is something that is I think we all want to do when we come into the team. So I did decide to make it a full career, but only that. I was going to
Mm.
leave and go get my doctorate while I was still kind of young enough to still do that, which brings me to that story. So I literally on 9/11/2001, I'm in my office. I'm the commanding officer of a SEAL team. I'm in my office back in Norfolk, Virginia, and CNN. We have a little CNN up there playing in my office in the background. I am literally that morning looking at somebody sent me an email about this program for getting your doctorate within the Navy,
Okay.
and staying in the Navy. And I was looking at that, and I saw the the airplane hit the building.
Mm.
I turned up the volume and I said, wow, that's amazing. And I go to my my command master chief, and I said, hey, Master Chief, come here. Some idiot flew an airplane in a building. Of course, we all, right? I think everybody who saw it while it was still happening, assumed that was just an accident. And as we're watching it, the second airplane hits, and I I don't know why I tell this story with my Master Chief's accent.
You got to do the
although,
accent.
although you did the same with Mav, so I guess it fits. Yeah, he's from outside of Portland, Maine,
Okay.
and we're seeing this, and nothing's clicking in my head. Have not made any connections. And he turns to me and he goes, "Well, Skipper, there goes your PhD."
Oh
And I said,
man.
"What are you talking about, Master Chief?" He goes, "We're going to war, Skipper." And I mean, he was right. We at that point we probably needed SEALs more than we needed more professors, and so I made the decision to stick around.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all knew by the time that after that second plane hit,
Yeah.
uh, I was thinking of people. We were already living out here, but I was thinking of people that I knew that were going to
Yeah.
hit the city every day.
Oh yeah, that's
And I
right.
was,
You're from New York or
yeah,
New
my
Jersey?
family's all from Brooklyn. So I grew up more on the Jersey
Yeah.
side, but by that time, a lot of my friends were already working in the city or living in the city.
Yeah.
We have a small family, but my father's sister, my only aunt, my mother's an only child, but she
Right.
was working uh, up near Union Square, near Union Station. So I was just going through, people that are close to me that I know are in the city every day.
Did you lose anybody?
A buddy that actually he was the starting quarterback at a high school my brother's graduating year.
Yeah.
He
Right.
passed away that day. He was with Cantor Fitzgerald. Um, I was surprised that there weren't more. Then subsequently, buddies from the Staten Island side and the Brooklyn side, um, that were with FDNY. Um, we subsequently lost some other friends,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's what I was thinking of. But we knew that morning. My oldest kid was sitting on my, she 6 months old, and I guess life's changed now. This next chapter of our lives as a country
Yeah.
is going to be different. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but for you, even more so. So
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I felt in some ways for people who were not in the military, because there was a certain sense of kind of helplessness in a way. I
yeah,
imagine that everybody felt. So I felt very fortunate that being that I'm a SEAL commander. I'm actually going to be able to kind of do something about this.
mm,
In a weird way, it felt good
yeah.
because I could do something. Yeah,
One of the things I was curious about, because I was kind of imagining as I was trying to learn more about the specific roles that you had, the different roles that you had, um, your experience in special warfare at numerous levels, uh, inherently it involved operations with extremely high stakes, right? Um, but here's where I was trying to make the connection. I would imagine that you were often in morally ambiguous or ethically challenging environments. And you went on that was we'll talk about your role at Annapolis with the Naval at the Naval Academy, but before before you went the PhD route, before you had that education, did you have the sort of ethical training or formation to be able to navigate those fog of war types of decisions that I would imagine you had to have made?
yeah, I love that question. The short answer is no, and not even close.
Mm,
Um, uh, so my first experience with combat was as a junior officer. during the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama.
Okay.
Um, and the mission of my team was primarily to roll up a laundry list of high value targets, and our Army counterparts were doing the same. Um, and it was, we had prepared for that mission. Yeah, I don't know if you recall the history of that time at all, but Manuel Noriega had basically taken over Panama, and the Panama Canal is very important to the United States, and he was a very destabilizing influence there, and the United States is only going to allow that for so long. It kind of sounds like realpolitik, but we made we made Panama. We created Panama. We could take them out. Yeah. So we knew this was a possibility for quite a while, and we had trained for it for a long period of time. We got every once in a while our pagers would go off. That was in the day of pagers. And we would come in and we wouldn't go, and it didn't seem like we ever would. And we hadn't really been in a war for a long time at that point, and I never really felt like we were actually going to do this. And one morning we came in, and sure enough, it was the real thing, and we ended up going there. And I recall we ended up doing, I was there for 3 weeks, I think, and we ended up doing about 25 combat missions during that time. But I remember the first combat mission I was in, I had no idea. I'd never been introduced to military ethics at all. And the closest thing I came was, hours before I was about to go into my first time in combat, all those things that are going through your brain. Am I going to lead my troops well? Am I going to be courageous? Am I going to be a coward? All that red badge, Stephen Crane, red badge of courage stuff that goes through your brain. And we got sat down by a lawyer who gave us a 2-hour rule of engagement briefing. It was, oh my God. I mean, it was awful. And I didn't listen at all. I remembered one thing from that ROE brief, rules of engagement brief, right? I learned one thing I remember from the ROE brief. They talked to me. The lawyer talked about war trophies, and apparently there's rules about war trophies.
Wow.
And I'm saying war trophies. The only trophy I want is my my own butt.
Right.
I'm not. It was awful. And then we went and we did our job reasonably well. And rules of engagement will get you so far, so that was good. But there was one mission that I went on. This was probably our 5th day in combat. We were dead tired. We were pretty pissed off at this point. We still hadn't captured some of the highest level guys that we had wanted to capture. And I made a decision that was very aggressive. It was lawful. It was within the rules of engagement, but it was very aggressive. And and some of that aggression was out of anger. I mean, we lost a couple of people from our task group were killed. If not for almost dumb luck, that aggressive order would have ended up in probably killing about a dozen women and children.
Wow.
Totally unintentionally, of course. But that one, Corey, hung on me, as you can imagine. And so I did my time there. I kept on going out and going outside the wire and doing my thing. But this thing was haunting me, and when I came home and looked at the mirror, it didn't look like me. It didn't look like the man that my parents had raised. And I really struggled. I struggled with, well, maybe I am just a stone cold killer.
Mm.
Maybe I just got to get out of here. I got to get out of the Navy. If anyway, it was about that point in time I discovered military ethics.
Yeah.
And it turns out we've been thinking about how to fight and win and come home with honor, come home as whole human beings, ready to reintegrate with the society that sent you to war, ready to reunite with your family. We've been thinking about this for millennia.
Yeah.
And thank God I discovered that. And I said, yeah, though this is my thing now. And throughout the Navy, I introduced these ideas to my wardrooms, to the people I led. When I was running the training command, I brought in this extraordinary master chief who, dude's like 6'3", 240 pounds, awesome SEAL. If you look up SEAL in a dictionary, it looks like him. But he was also a brilliant dude, and he ended up going to Harvard Divinity School, and I'm pretty sure he's an atheist. This is just a weird dude, and I brought him in to teach ethics to these brand new people coming in. So we wanted, so it changed the trajectory of how I led, but it also put out there what I wanted to become. I wanted to study. Particularly military ethics.
Yeah, I watched a class that you taught. I think this was at Annapolis, and it was interesting because it's it's an amateur YouTube video basically, but it pans out at one point, and you see students. What I'm sorry, I should know this, but what do you call students at Naval Academy?
Midshipmen.
Midshipmen. Okay, so you
Yep.
see midshipmen pouring in both doors from the sides. The class was already full, but they were pouring in from the sides to listen in because what you were teaching on, it wasn't theoretical. It was clear that you were speaking from experience, and then you were identifying specific instances and breaking it down into the way that you had shared in a Substack piece. I should pull it up just so I don't get it wrong. But the way that you said, is it unethical? Is it illegal? Is it unwise? Or it was similarly articulated. But you gave a framework to kind of, I think of it as these are really complex situations, but it was distilled in a way so that you don't have to think of Immanuel Kant's extensive tomes. It was understandable, but also executable through specific filters. I'm going off script here, but I just want to, that's how it was striking me. Is that something that you engineer and that you're going for, so that it is indeed executable in strained moments?
Yeah. Well, that was a good off script moment because again, it brought you to a terrific question. So first of all, in terms of trying to get my students engaged, I don't like telling sort of war stories. Mostly because I'm not the hero of any of them. If I were the hero, I'd like telling them. But yeah, I tend to be the butt of the joke. But that does, because these kids, they're getting ready to do this.
Yeah.
And when I was teaching, we were still engaged in if you were a SEAL, you were going to be going to Afghanistan or Iraq. and you were going to go into combat. When I
Mm-hmm.
came in, the likelihood of combat actually seemed somewhat remote. But these kids that were coming to the Naval Academy, they knew they were going to do this, so they would hang on your stories. And so what I discovered was that they'll even listen to me lecture on Immanuel Kant if I can tell them one more story to get them started. But and those things did help me engage with my students, and I appreciated that. And so maybe after my first, I got a lot of feedback from my first, on the student feedback forums, and they said more stories, more stories, more stories,
Mm.
and so I started really incorporating them, and even incorporating them strategically. I knew when I was going to tell this story, this story, this story. So that was my little cheat while I was there to get people's attention.
Yeah.
But in terms of the usability of this, um, I can only take credit as a jointly. Um, when we were all of the service academies were required by Congress in 1990 to establish an ethics program.
Okay.
And actually, the better question should be, why didn't we know that? That should always have
Wow.
been,
Yeah.
because war, no matter how righteous a war is, it's always going to be morally complicated to take another human life, which is
Mm-hmm.
what happens in war sometimes at scale. Um, so anyway, we had put together a a course in ethics and moral reasoning at the Naval Academy that looks probably a lot like a 101 course, at Brown, at any college or university. You go in there and you get introduced to deontological theory, and then now we're done with that. Now we move to this theory. Now we move to this theory, and now we take their final exam, and now you go off and forget everything. And and we got a lot of feedback from our students, meaning I don't quite know why I would choose one over the other, how I would go about doing this, how I would ever use it. Great course, really loved it, whatever, but it just wasn't useful. So what we did, and this is something that right before I left, we got this finally approved, and we had to get it approved. We couldn't just, so every midshipman has to run, this is one of our core courses, has to run through this course. And my job was running the whole curriculum. So I taught my classes, but I also ran the whole curriculum. And and we finally got this new curriculum approved right before I left. So I was very happy to get that across the finish line. And what the new curriculum did was put moral reasoning as a process, not as a bag of tricks that you can reach into. It's like, I think I want to, employ utilitarian theory here. I think I want to, because that's going to be really hard to do at the speed of war.
Right.
Okay. What we introduced was we call it the moral deliberation roadmap,
Okay.
which was a process. So first you ask, okay, what do I owe to other people? This was, and we put it under the term constraints. What do
Right.
I owe to other people? Because they're people, right? Because every human's, some disagree with this, but most Western thinkers agree that humans, as humans, have rights. And so what do I owe them because of that? And then, yes, we go into the deontological reasoning, and we subject them to Kant and all that. But the first question is, hey, what do I owe to other people as people? Okay, then the next question is, okay, what are the likely outcomes? Okay,
Yeah.
and this is what are the likely consequences? And then we start diving into primarily utilitarian theory, John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, those guys, and it sounds utilitarian. The bumper sticker is, what's the greatest good for the greatest number. That sounds very simple, and it is, but it's not easy. It's very hard, because if you do it the way it's supposed to be done, you have to think of a lot of things. Okay, both of those are going to kind of eliminate certain ID. I can't do this, I can't do this, or I have to do this. Okay, then you turn to special obligations. What do I owe to certain people, to specific people, because of the role I'm in, or the relationship I have, or maybe a promise that I made, the oath we take to the Constitution. That's a very important special obligation. And then the last question we ask is, how is this going to affect my character? Who am I going to be the day after? What is that reflection in the mirror going to look like? And this doesn't spit out an answer, but it eliminates a lot of options, and it basically triangulates where you now will have asked all those important ethical questions, and now I can make my decision. And that I believe you can do at the speed of war, mostly, not always.
So you did bring this up in a recent piece on your Substack, duty-based, outcome-based, character-based moral theories. Since we're talking about it, there have been recent events where I would imagine soldiers would be asking themselves these very questions. What might be some recent examples where this came into question?
Um, One of the stories we use to good effect, one of the cases we use to good effect, is Michael Murphy in Afghanistan. They what became the lone survivor
Mm,
case of you are confronted with a situation where you have a, and I guess I'll rehearse the case quickly. I think that a lot of people have seen the movie directed by Peter Bergen, which was quite good.
yeah.
Uh, and quite true for the most part, true to what actually happened in the lone survivor case with Marcus Luttrell, of course. But they were doing a reconnaissance operation. This is a 4-man reconnaissance operation deep in the Anbar Province, where a lot of people questioned whether they should have been sent on that mission, and I know at least one Army colonel's career came to an end on that decision. But there they were, and they got literally walked on by 3 goat herds. And I mean literally walked on. They were in hiding during the day, and were getting ready to extract at night. And one of the goat herds stepped on. Actually, I stepped on Marcus Luttrell, and so they took them prisoner. And what do you do with these 3 goat herd prisoners? They are obviously they're non-combatants, but there's no such thing as a non-combatant in the Anbar province. They were going to, if you let them go, they're going to alert a force that will probably get to you before you get out of there. This is extremely rugged terrain. And of course, the temptation is there to kill them. And walking through that process is exactly none of those folks had the Moral Liberation Roadmap handy, but what a great time to have applied the Moral Liberation Roadmap. And I think ultimately that roadmap would spit out doing what exactly they did. And that was to let them go and try to get out of there before the reaction force could do what it did. And unfortunately, it didn't. Marcus was the only one who survived the firefight, which was extraordinary. I mean, I don't know what the number is. Let's say 100-4, and they had the high ground, and they fought for hours. It's just amazing what those 4 SEALs did. And then, but three of them died in that, and were killed in that. And then Marcus, he did a sort of a famous evacuation out of there. But of course, it got more tragic because the quick reaction force that Mike Murphy was ultimately able to call in at, and it cost him his life doing that. And that's why he was awarded the Medal of Honor, very rightfully so.
Mm.
Um, the team came in, and this ended up being the largest. 13 SEALs were killed in the quick reaction force. So this became the largest loss of life in SEAL history up to that point. Unfortunately, that got beat later in Afghanistan when their helicopter got shot out of the sky.
Yeah.
So it was a tragic day. That was my fifth day in theater. I'd just taken over command of the Naval Special Warfare Unit that had operational command over all the SEALs in theater. And that was my fifth day in command. It was kind of welcome to the war.
Wow.
Yeah.
As I was learning about, again, your deployments and your missions, it was over the course of, several days, if not a few weeks. And it seems like every day there's something that occurs, with the current commander in chief and the current Secretary of Defense, that I would imagine if I were in your shoes, active, that a lot of these moral questions would be would be coming front of mind. So I really do appreciate that. That's why when Liz told me about your Substack, I just it's a really helpful. Several of your submissions have been really helpful for me to think through how I live in Southern California. So how does a Marine think through a deployment, to the streets of LA when, LAPD was doing pretty good. We know how to do this, this thing. Not to say that there weren't, shenanigans happening and people burning Waymos and graffiti and all that, but LAPD was doing okay. you know, I, I'm that's a little bit more of a softball I'm throwing your way. If there's anything in particular that you want to address about that, but I just all that to say, like, I would imagine if I was a Marine in that situation, I'd be asking these very questions. What's the right thing to do? What do we owe each other as people? The right thing to do that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. How will this affect not just my character, but the character of my community? I'd be asking these questions every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only would I be asking those questions, three of my former students were part of 2-7 Marines. They were part of that battalion that deployed.
Mm.
I actually got a call from one of them before he deployed, just to check in with his. He hunted me down on LinkedIn, and he just thought he should check in with his ethics professor
Wow.
before he went. And
Oh, I mean, that's a good thing in a way, though, right?
oh, amazing! Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you what, we should be so we should feel good about this, that our Marine officers are, they recognized that they were going into a situation that essentially they were not prepared for.
Yeah.
Now a Marine is prepared for anything. Marines are awesome. I love them. But they're walking into this thing. It's like, oh my goodness, this is not what I thought. I'm really happy that the phone went off, and I'm answering the call. We got a real one. This is a real world thing. And then to find out it's going to be, we got to drive to Los Angeles from, from 29 Palms. That's not exactly what they had in mind. So he literally asked me, and I asked him, it's like, okay, how much time do you have? and he goes, yeah, because we could talk for a day now. You ask an ethics professor about an ethical question, we can talk your ear off. Uh, and he says, "Sir, I've got about 2 minutes."
Oh, wow.
So when and as it turns out, I think we really did prepare the curriculum that we presented to them, and that I talked about in that Substack. I'm pretty sure. Actually, as I saw you were reading my Substacks, I go, oh man, he's going to know more about what I wrote than I did. But and thank you for doing that. That was that made me feel good. Um, but we really do kind of prepare them well for that, and we take an entire week. And by the way, this is just my course, so the whole Naval Academy experience is doing this for these people that are getting ready to take on this very important obligation. They're going to take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, to run toward the sound of the guns instead of running away like prudence would dictate.
Yeah.
And this one part of the curriculum where we talk about special obligations, we talk about the special obligation we incur by taking the oath of office, and we break that son of a gun down into its bare bones. What exactly are we promising to do? And for the for the Marines, this idea really, we talked about this, the hierarchy of loyalties. At the very bottom is loyalty to self and to your fellow Marine. And I reminded my student that don't ever forget to defend yourself. Don't ever forget that the right of self-defense is always there. And the right to defend your teammate is always there. Don't ever forget that. But remember that self-defense, it needs to be proportional. It needs to be only against an imminent threat, and it only needs to be the amount of force necessary to eliminate the threat. The next thing we talk about is unit and service. And I never really thought about how important this really was. But here it was vitally important. The Second and the Seventh Marines, they have this storied history in the Second World War, in Korea and Vietnam. If you read their history today, part of their history is going to be the LA riots. And that's now part of their history. How will history remember that? I suspect it's going to be something that's not remembered at all, because it never escalated to anything awful, but
Yeah.
it could have. And then ultimately, my duty is to the Constitution, is to the mission and the Constitution. And one of the things we remind our students of during that period is, unlike most oaths, unlike most militaries, the U.S. military is almost unique in that we take an oath to a document, not to a person, to a document, and especially our officer corps. So the oath is actually different between an enlisted person and an officer. They sound very similar, but there's one line in an enlisted person's oath that is, "I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed above me." That does not appear in the officer's oath, because we want our officers to be making independent decisions all the time. And yes, their chain of command goes up through at various levels, and all the way up to the commander in chief. But our officers also have an obligation to say no to palpably illegal or palpably immoral orders. And it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge burden.
Yeah.
Because if you get that wrong, you may end up in jail for disobeying a lawful order.
So I as I was reading some more of your Substacks, some of those entries, questions were arising. At one point you said that you were confident that the military is going to rise above the politics of this moment, this anxious moment. And well, why? And this is why. This is why. The way you put it in one of your pieces in April summed it up really well. You said the bias toward obedience is not an absolute edict. Not all orders are created equal. They vary along three axes: prudence, legality, and morality. And that's the one that I wrote you about in advance, the one that resonated with the framework that David French has been articulating this year.
Got it. I didn't put that together. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, yeah. So this also it's interesting. It's encouraging because it sounds like you have an upcoming book that is loosely titled "Moral Map and Compass: An Introduction to Ethics for Teens." So you really are continuing your work for shaping the leaders of tomorrow. Tell me about this upcoming book that you're working on.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not off the ground yet, but it's gotten it's off the ground at least enough that I've gotten one rejection. So that's a first start in every journey to get a book published. But I somewhere near the end of my doctoral studies and before I joined the faculty of the Naval Academy, I took a job out of academic recklessness because I was just doing my dissertation, and I felt I needed something else. I took a job as the head of school for the Outdoor Academy.
The Outdoor Academy, yeah.
Yeah, and I had never worked with teens before, really, and all of a sudden I get introduced to mostly 15 and 16-year-olds. And holy cow, these aren't just small adults.
Yeah.
And I'm used to working with 18 and 19-year-olds, but a 15 and 16-year-old is not an 18 and 19-year-old. And at first it became somewhat terrifying until I started figuring out what was going on in their brains. And I mean, this is such a critical period. This is when they're forming their identity, and a lot of their obnoxiousness is all wrapped up around this identity formulation. And then all of a sudden I realized I really loved working with teens. In fact, I would have never, I turned down other jobs while I was at the Outdoor Academy, other academic, sort of traditional academic jobs, because I really did love it there. And I figured that's where I was going to spend the rest of my career. I couldn't say no to Naval Academy though, and I'm glad I didn't. But yeah. But I did kind of get this itch to start working with teens, and we and I started introducing ethics curricula into the curriculum that's out there, and it's kind of the Outdoor Academy curriculum is already built that way. I mean, it's rigorous academics plus all the things you learn in the backcountry, backpacking and backpacking and whitewater paddling and rock climbing, and sort of a master's level course in living in community. In fact, the mission of the Outdoor Academy, it's experiential education for young people, promoting the natural world and the betterment of human character. It's like, oh man, that's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah. But so I kind of got addicted to the idea of working with teens and to introducing these ideas at that age, maybe more to 16-year-olds than 15-year-olds, maybe junior or senior, but I think we can introduce that. And so the book that I'm writing, it follows this model that is a little bit like the Naval Academy's model, but it's a model that follows 7 questions. And so again, I'm putting this into a format that you don't have to consult Immanuel Kant all the time. Because if you can go a day without consulting Immanuel Kant, it's a good day. Because Immanuel Kant's hard, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then once they get the top tip of the iceberg in terms of what you do, then you get introduced to Immanuel Kant and all that stuff. So I mean, this is what brings them in, and then I'm co-authoring this book with this wonderful person who is Susan Tinsley, who was my dean of academics at the Outdoor Academy.
Oh, great.
I'm sorry, dean of students at Outdoor Academy, and she's a highly qualified counselor, and so we're starting every chapter with a case study that it'll be fictionalized, but she's going to write those case studies. And we want those case studies to be as lurid as possible. We want those case studies to be, to make everybody kind of go, ooh, that could be me.
Yeah.
And then I write the boring philosophy stuff that goes behind those decisions. And I think I'm really excited about this book. We've been doing more talking about it than writing on it. And like I said, we got our first rejection, and I decided I was going to pull back and actually write a chapter. So for any future rejections that I get, they will at least know what they're saying no to.
Yeah.
I talked to, very informally to the publisher at the second book that we wrote, and Routledge, and I just, hey, by the way, while we're getting ready to write the second book, I got this idea, and I told her about it. It's like, is that something that Routledge might be interested in publishing? And she goes, oh no. And I go, you didn't have to say it like that. And she goes, yeah, there's just really not a market for ethics at the high school level.
Oh, wow.
And to that, I said, yes, I agree. That's the point. That's what we're trying to do. That's our point. And so this is going to be my, the windmill I'll tilt at as long as I need to tilt at it to get this across the finish line. And this should be the way we're writing this book, or the way we plan on writing it, is something that any humanities teacher who maybe has a semester they can offer an elective could pull the book off the shelf and could work through this. You don't have to have a doctorate in a related field. You can be a high school teacher and you can pull this off. And I'm confident we're going to do this. I'm also confident we'll get a publisher.
Well, the other bar is to see if it's really I talk about trophies. If it's one of the 300 plus books that eventually gets banned from the Nimitz library. So I can't help but wonder,
Hey, by the way, there's an update to that. And I credit my former colleagues at the Naval Academy, I'm sure, but I believe that almost all of them have been returned to their shelves.
Okay,
and
that's encouraging.
I'm sure it was a one by one. It's like, no, you got to understand, this is why this is here. This is why this is here. Having said that, the compromise of academic freedom there is real. It's ongoing. It's not just the Naval Academy. It's at all the service academies and war colleges.
Yeah.
And I'm working on an article right now on that as well.
Wow. I can't wait to read that. I do have a couple more questions for you. I realize that we've gone pretty long here. If I wasn't necessarily looking at the clock, but my body clock is telling me, I've been drinking some water, so my body clock is telling me I've kept you longer than I'm sure you wanted to. But one really important question, and it's the heart of our show. It's the TP&R question. What do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with perhaps even nurture relationships with people across our differences. So that's people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who have different experiences than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other? Or is it even possible?
So I'm probably I'm way less optimistic than Liz, than my sister. Again, I mean, what a career she had, tilting at that windmill. Um, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on um, the role of propaganda to bring a state to war. Mm. It was a highly forgettable dissertation. I think, a dissertation, when they really are good, they turn into books. I think I got into my car in Charlottesville and threw mine in the back of. I think it was still back there when I sold the car, so I don't even know where the hard copy is anymore. But there was one thing that I did take away from this, and that is that in the hands of a good propagandist, we're toast. Mm. It was I don't have the quote. I wish I did. It was Goering, who was asked about bringing the country to war, and it's like, and he goes, yeah, of course people don't want to go to war, but public opinion is going to be whatever I say it is, basically. Mm. Because I can manipulate that. I can make that. That's not even a problem.
Wow.
And of course he was very successful. I think that we are swimming in a sea of propaganda right now. And unless we can pull ourselves out of that sea, I feel that it may be hopeless. So it's somehow we've got to get our lips above the water of this sea of propaganda that we're swimming in. Bob Woodward came out and he spoke to my class at the National War College. This is when I was a commander. It's another master's conferring service college that you go into with fellow military, State Department, CIA. It's a great program. Anyway, he came in and spoke to us, and he said, "Look, you as military officers need to be well informed on the events of the world, and it's a very narrow." How you do that is very narrow. And he goes, I think there's about 5 news organizations right now that you can trust. And this was many years ago, and he listed the news organizations, and they were interestingly. He goes, I'm not sure about the Post, but his comment was, ask yourself, does this source of information have a bias? And he goes, bear in mind, the answer is going to be yes. He goes, everybody has a bias. These things are written by human beings, and human beings have bias, whatever. And then ask yourself, does it have a left or right, not a left or right bias, but a left or right agenda? Mm. And he goes, if it has a left or right agenda, steer clear. And again, the number of news organizations that don't have a left or right agenda, he said back in 2005, was small and shrinking. And like I said, I don't think we can even. I don't, until we can talk to each other. I don't know how we're going to get past this. And so I think we owe. We all owe it to ourselves to ask those questions. Does this have a bias? And if it does, always keep that in the back of your mind. And then, does this have an agenda? And if it does, please turn it off.
Yeah.
I would just beg my fellow citizen to be doing that. I'll add one other thing to that idea, um, and that is when I just finished buds, and I had some time before I was going to report to my first SEAL team, and my dad brought me in um, to meet an admiral SEAL. He actually had left the SEAL. He wasn't an admiral within the SEAL. But anyway, so he introduces me to this guy, and he gives me a book, um, The True Believer, and holy cow, who's the author? True Believer.
I'll look it up right now.
Oh, okay. I, why do I not know this? Anyway, um,
Thoughts on the nature of mass movements, and that is Eric.
Eric
Uh,
Hoffer.
yeah, yeah, Eric
Eric Hoffer.
Hoffer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, so Eric Hoffer, True Believer. Now, it was written mostly, I think it was written in the 50s. It was mostly about the Nazi. And it's like the true believer is basically your enemy. And this is what the admiral says. Okay, this is your enemy. Know your enemy. Your enemy is the true believer. Eric Hoffer was writing that about Nazis. But the admiral was talking about it primarily in the this is while radical Islam is on the rise and becoming very dangerous, and this is what he was thinking. Right now, I can see the dangers of this. Of so many of our citizens have become true believers in one camp or the other. And if we are true believers, then we can only see the other as the enemy. And how we emerge from this, Corey, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is um, for the last 45 years, um, uh, certainly the right wing media has developed this ecosystem that has a radical agenda, a right agenda, and then the left responded with its own ecosystem to counter it, I guess. But it's and I don't consider them equivalents, but they're both out there, and they're both dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so much of what you say makes a lot of sense, and it comports with my experience. A lot of times when I'm speaking to someone, whether it's at the local pub or, online, high school friend, work colleague, and I might be talking about exactly news sources and what are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you watching? Uh, I get a look, and I didn't realize this until the way you described it is we're swimming in a sea of propaganda. And I get a look as if I was talking to a fish and asking the fish, how's the
Yeah,
water? And the fish
right,
answers, what's water?
right,
you know,
nice, nice.
but
Yeah,
I think just to encourage you, I do think that there are sources that are emerging now that have diagnosed this very problem and are addressing it in a number of ways. Tango comes to mind. Isaac Saul's team, they have one way of addressing it. They treat a story a day. It's readtangle.com. They treat a story, and they have a podcast as well. One story a day, and the way they give it, I think of it as a just straight news summary with careful attention to even the wording of how they're summarizing it. Then
yeah,
they reference three analyses from the left, three analyses from the right, and Isaac typically, as the editor in chief, will give his take on it. So you're getting and they give the sources of the left leaning and right leaning
right,
treatments. Another really good one, and I usually this is the first place I go to is Ground News. It's actually they curate. They're not they don't write their own stories so much as they curate and are a resource that they simply provide other links to other news outlets and
right.
categorize them as centrist, left, far right. So that's a really good way to take in stories is to read a few different treatments of the same story. But that does give me some encouragement that clearly others have diagnosed the same problem.
No, that's great, Corey. And I don't know those two organizations. So my idea of being in the middle is PBS NewsHour, and it does lean to the left, but it also just a little bit, and they are very careful about that.
Yeah.
But these things, they sound terrific. The question is, how can we herd some folks to the
Just,
center, and even to, there's some on both sides, just very narrowly, left or right. That's where we all need to be, and then we can
yeah.
have those conversations. But that's great, and I appreciate those recommendations, and I'm gonna explore.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think of it as one starfish at a time. I don't know if you know that story, but one starfish, for me, it's one conversation, one person at a time. And even within conversations, 1 degree at a time. I'm not the kind of guy that I guess I'm not persuasive enough to convince somebody to make a 180-degree turn in one conversation. But
Yeah, right.
um, usually I can get 1 degree, but it usually goes both ways where I'm also persuaded and changed and affected by somebody, the person I'm talking to, by 1 degree.
Well, that speaks highly for you. To be persuadable is very important. Yeah.
I will say I have my limits though. I have my limits, so some guys are just, I got to call it a day, back away. Otherwise we're going to throw down. Somebody's going to get hurt. So I want to make sure that folks know how to follow you, find the great Substack. You got an upcoming speaking engagement. How can folks follow all the great work that you're doing and learn about all the stuff you got coming up?
Yeah, honestly, most of my speaking engagements are not broadcast. Yeah, I've got one coming up in about a week and a half, maybe. I'm talking at St. Benedict's Prep. You're not gonna be able to follow it. But you might want to look at St. Benedict's Prep and look at it. It's an amazing school out in Newark, New Jersey, and
Nothing good ever came out of Jersey.
yeah, there you go. It can't be all bad, right? Um, and yeah, so it's an amazing place, and I feel really honored to be able to
Oh,
go
that's
there.
great.
But in terms of following me, I'm not that followable anymore, now that I've stepped away. I still write. I write mostly academic pieces that are read by literally dozens of people. um, uh, but yes, do look for the ethics of special ops, the one you referenced earlier. We wrote that for in a way that we thought that non-ethics people could enjoy, and it's unfortunately Cambridge University Press priced it as an academic book,
Mm.
but they finally brought it out as paperback, so
Oh,
it's now
good.
now affordable. But the Substack, I just felt, I don't know the one starfish at a time thing, but I did sort of feel the same way of now that I'm not teaching, I should be doing something, and that was a way that as a retired academic, I thought that um, uh, I could contribute to the conversation. And yeah, that is, I went through a lot of branding decisions on that, and we came away with, after much research, Roger Herbert's Substack.
That's
Not
awesome.
terribly clever.
No, that's great. We'll be sure to put that link in the show notes as well.
I would appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, Roger/Dr. Herbert/Captain /Skipper.
Yeah, skip by.
This is really terrific. I'm so glad to get to know you better. This is a real treat for me. Um, so thanks for taking the time and doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Liz told me that I was going to enjoy chatting with you, and I certainly did.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's great.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, we'll have to have you back. There's so many things that happen on any given day, but certainly, from time to time, it'll be great to have you back when it gets closer to the new book coming out for sure. That'll be a fun conversation as well. So,
Nice.
and as always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow the show, write that review. Now you can watch these conversations on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@politicsandreligion. And I am at Corey S. Nathan, at Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan, on all the socials, including TikTok. I'm back on TikTok, so China can watch me. And we're also on Substack, a little bit more highfalutin, I guess. Now, go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.